to the Austin Stagehand History Project. My name is Brad Wilson. All the way over there is Jon Stewart, Jon Miller, Jon Maloy, Jon Vickers. And now I'm going to ask everyone to introduce themselves. Without further ado, Jon Stewart.
South Austin kids. I'm always interested in movies, and so I just gravitated towards the Austin Theater every weekend and saw Jon's dad in the booth. Ingratiated myself into it, and it was all downhill from there. So after I got out of the Air Force, I came back to Austin and joined the local, started working then, and did stage work on the side occasionally when they needed a body that didn't know what they were doing.
And when was that roughly?
Well, I came into the local in 72.
Okay.
Yeah. But even as a kid, I was interested in what was going on up there in the booth behind me. I even had toy projectors. It was in my blood. I was vaccinated by a projector.
Nice. Yeah. Very timely. And Jon Miller.
Well, I started out in college doing load-ins and load-outs for the rock and roll shows in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. I went to University of Minnesota and got a BA in theater, and then I moved to Texas, spent a year at Granbury Opera House.
When was that you moved to Texas?
That would be 79. I moved to Austin in 1980 to go to graduate school. And I think my first working job would be in spring of 81, right before the Bass Concert Hall opened, because they hired me to repair the wraparound cyclorama filled scrim, 40 feet in the air. And all of the battens are at about the same level. And they flew me up on the motorized stage left lighting bridge. And I carefully reached out and repaired things. And I look over, and there's Bruce Darden walking across the battens as if it were a floor. No safety harness, nothing.
Yeah. Well, they were close enough together. He could
6-inch centers.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jon. And Jon Maloy?
Well, thank you. When my dad was young, he got a toy projector, and he loved it. And in the neighborhood was the RCA engineer for most of the Austin theaters. And he would take my dad when he needed a two-man job. My dad went into the Army, got into special services, and worked projecting training films and recreation films and USO shows. When he came back, of course, he waited in line, got in the local the year I was born. And so I've been pretty much born into it. My first job was 75 cents an hour as an usher at the Austin Theater. And from there, I went to each booth at one time or another to break in so that you could be a replacement projectionist. So I did that for a short while, but worked mostly on stage.
And last but certainly not least, Jon Vickers.
I am Jon Vickers, and that is without an H, as Jon Maloy is without an H.
And we're left-handed.
I am right-handed.
There you are, two Johns are left-handed.
But he has an H.
Yeah.
I became a member of 205 in 1961. But I started working with the local in 57. And I struggled trying to get into the local. My first job was at Gregory Gymnasium. I was drama department's only tech major. And the first show that I worked was Little Abner. I finished my degree in January of 60, and by June, I was in the Army. And finally, I was sworn in as a member of Local 205 in El Paso, Texas. I returned from the Army and immediately went on the road with my first road job.
So now is the tool of the day. And so, is that picture you, Johnny?
No, that's my youngest son.
So today's tool is a historical one, and it's missing
there
a
was
part?
designed for hemp houses. There is a part missing. And I did that intentionally to give you a clue. Because if you're rigging that, where's the safety? Aha! Everything in the original Hello Dolly, every drop, except the anchor. We had our own anchor, and that was on a cable stretched scrim. But these, we carried these, chained it to the house pipe, brought the second pipe in. You have your drop on downstage set, and the trip line grabbed the bottom. It had a skirt, and when it came in, the second pipe is going with it. So it was a heavy labor blindfold, because you don't make the same guy pull both ropes.
Right.
And the drop would come in. This is trailing. And then as the drop is taken out, this is following, and the first pipe reaches its limit, and this one goes up to take the drop completely out of sight. Now in the center panel, you see this around a batten, and it was sandwiched, 2 thin strips of wood, and the drop is permanently glued and nailed.
So did we ever say what it's called?
This is a hanging iron.
But didn't you find another name for it?
Bottom hanger iron hooked.
Well, it's
What
exactly
batten
what
The
it is.
illustration is.
Wasn't batten clamp also a name or something that somebody found? I thought.
Well, that's what I thought it was at first.
You see
In
there,
hip houses,
that's the top hang.
this would be
Yeah.
the top.
Yeah.
So it's dual usage. We only use them for tripping.
And the part that's missing?
And the part that is missing is the safety.
Which was?
There's a little knob right here. It is a intentional, built as they're molding this piece. There is a slip ring. And if you're not careful, they would get lost, because they'll come right off.
Right.
All right, yeah. That just locks it.
If you've ever seen a roll drop come in, it is beautiful.
When it works, it's beautiful.
Well, yes.
The rate of error seems to be rather high, though.
Well, you know, this considered ancient, but it's, while I was on tour, these were still listed in any catalog to be purchased.
So we did get some questions from members of Local 205. Joan, if you don't mind, we'll start with you. Who influenced you the most when you were new to the business?
Oh, definitely Rita Kelso.
Okay, how
Because
so?
there she
Yeah.
was working wardrobe and also working spot up, crews, doing everything. Rita, big, bold, and sassy.
Now, was she a teacher or more of
No.
an example?
More an example.
Okay.
Yeah. I had heard about her for a while, and then Ballet Austin went to the Paramount, and I was their wardrobe supervisor, and she was my crew. And so she actually was working for me Well, every time after that, I was working for her, but it kind of set something up in our relationship.
Very cool. Thanks. Mr. Stewart, who's your big early influence?
John's dad. He's a projectionist at the Austin Theater. And
Yeah.
I used to go up every weekend and annoy him. I saw a lot of free movies. I'm going to go, I'm going to go see Mr. Maloy.
And that's Jim Maloy, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
Jim,
yeah,
Exactly right. Yeah, he was a good man and tried to get me to join the Boy Scouts, but I wasn't a joiner. So the Boy Scouts made their own little movies. Jim was very proactive with young people, seems like.
Yeah.
So how old were you at that point?
I was probably 10 or 12.
Oh, so very early influence. Okay.
And I was more interested in that light coming out of the room than I was
Right.
the movie most of the time.
Right.
Yeah.
What about when you were as a professional when you were doing it? Who were some early influences?
When you first come in as projectionist, you go to each booth and learn how to operate it. So if that person needs a day off or needs a vacation, you could go fill in. So you learn everything that's in the city. And so a lot of the older heads like Alvin Riley and Bill Simpson, some of those guys, the older guys. Sheriff Simpson was such a good old guy.
Yeah.
When you were an alternate like that, was that just you get a call and go now?
Yeah.
And
Usually
no advance notice?
unless it was an emergency. Most guys, if they're going to do a vacation or something, well, it's planned ahead of
Yeah.
time.
Okay.
I was really sick in my old age here, thinking about the booths that I worked in that I didn't document with pictures, which I did towards the end, but I didn't do all that many. I did a few, but not much.
Which a lot of the pictures that you've seen in this show were taken by that man, by the way. So how about you, Jon Maloy? Who's some
Well,
early
I would have to go with
influences?
Sheriff Simpson,
Okay.
particularly just the one-on-one I had with him, and he was an old line populist FDR liberal. I mean, he couldn't understand why some people acted certain ways, and for some reason that just kind of hit my personality. Like, I understand where you're coming from, and like I said, when he had his heart attack, I took over his booth because it was showing pornos by then, and nobody wanted to work it. Which I spent 2 years working in porno theaters because the old guys didn't like it. Sheriff and even his son Bill Simpson. Bill was a great guy.
Yeah.
When they opened the Superdrum at UT, Gordon Kelso hired Bill to be his carpenter, and he was there for a year or two. And that was also a time when, because the Owen Center opened up, we had to change our whole tune about working on UT. And when I came in, Stagehands paid a $50 initiation fee, and Projectionists had a $550.
Wow.
And they, of course, on my first application, they put Projectionist, and I said, no, I don't want to be a projection. Obviously, I want to be a stagehand. So what they did is they didn't take anyone in for about 6 months. Dorothy Holly and I were kind of waiting in line, and they basically changed it to where stagehands paid $550, just like the Projectionists. So Dorothy
Shocking that they didn't lower it.
Yeah.
To equalize
Dorothy
it.
and I were the first ones to have to pay that, but it was still worth it as far as I was concerned.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
How about you, Mr. Vickers? Early influences?
William C. Leet.
Okay. And you worked for him, right?
I worked for him, and eventually I bought
I
his
was gonna
business.
say, yeah.
But between Mr. Leet and Charlie Schubert, fantastic projectionist, Bill Leet was never in a booth. He controlled all the building and grounds personnel and Gregory Gymnasium. He was in charge from the very beginning, but he was never an officer. He almost never attended a meeting that I know of, but He was a very important person because of UT having the only working theater in town. But it was the old people. Sheriff Simpson, James Maloy, they were the heartbeat of the local. Maybe it proved to be deficient because it was the projectionists on their own dealing put themselves out of business across the United States, not just local 205.
So thanks to Paula Gilbert for that question. Next one is from Nikki Combs, and she asked what was the average pay rate when y'all were starting out. I guess we've got projectionists and stagehands, so we can get all of the above.
I could no more tell you than what I made the first few years. It wasn't a lot. We didn't do it to make money because there was not that much money in it. As a projectionist, stagehands got all these weird hours and, got a little bit more stuff, but the projectionist was pretty cut and dry. Show this movie, show this movie, show this movie, show this movie. And I think we were paid cash every week. It was like less than $40 a week, I think, for 5 or 6 shifts.
And y'all were paid like shifts, not per movie, right?
Yeah. Shift.
Yeah.
Oh,
6 hours.
Now, Johnny, earlier you were talking about at one hall you got $20 per show, and then you switched to another, and it was only $3.
That was not me.
Or was that Jon
that
Vickers'
was
story?
me.
Yeah.
Jon Vickers' story.
I got $20 from UT. I was never paid by the local.
Yeah.
While I was at Gregory Gymnasium. Actually, I was there to keep an eye on the local. But the fact that I knew how to run a Huff board, Gregory had a Huff board, and so did Hog Auditorium. Each board was different, but basically the same thing. It had a crank. When I worked at the Paramount, $3 a night, that came out of Charlie Schubert's own paycheck. He paid me out of pocket to change the masking backstage at the Paramount.
Towards the end, when I was there, we on the stage right, there was where the cabling was to change the top masking, and you bring it up.
That's right.
And it
Paramount.
was attached to the frame.
We could mention now that stagehands probably through the late 70s were all contract. There's no bennies, there's no vacation time, there's no IRS withholding, and we're talking about, I think in the mid 70s I made $5,000 a year, and that was the highest I'd ever made, and I got audited that year too. Now why they would audit a $5,000 a year stagehand, I don't know, but there was a lot of anti-war stuff going on at the same time, and IRS was being accused of picking out the likely, what do I know? And even,
You were a socialist.
yeah,
is what you're
into
saying.
legally we were all contract labor, and we should have been contributing quarterly to the IRS, which is what I learned when I got audited.
Right. You learn a lot.
Wow.
Yeah, and now you can go to work now, and you've got vacation time, and you've got insurance, and you've got overtime benefits, and holidays, Sunday rates.
Though there are plenty of stagehands who are still getting $10.99 in this town.
Yeah.
Okay, I remember in the 80s, about mid to late 80s, suddenly they read the rules and said, you are not
Yeah.
1099.
Yeah.
Right.
And Paramount was one of the first ones,
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah, it was better.
that said, you are not contract labor, you are an employee, you're paid by the hour, we tell you when to show up and when not to,
Right.
which is the big difference.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And suddenly they were taking out taxes and...
So what about when you started at UT? What was, you remember
I don't
rate?
remember what it first was, but sometime in mid-'80s, as an appointed stagehand, it was like $6.86 an hour.
Okay.
As a student, I remember I was taking 9 credit hours, 3 courses of 3 credit hours each, and it cost me $150.50. And I had to get a loan, a 1-month loan for the $150.
Right.
And write a check for 50 cents.
So we want to thank everybody that participated in our trivia question, which was who was the first female member of Local 205. The winner, who came back with not only that, but the rest of the first 5 women, was Rita Kelso. So she is the winner of the Fancy George Bedard original No Jive 205 stagehand shirt, because she knew that the first woman to join the local was Nova Lee Duffy, then Mary Nelson, then Dottie Holly, then Rita herself, and then Patty Dillon. So she definitely gets the shirt because she had extra credit as well. We want to thank Kurt Grander and Chris Maloy because they also came in with answers. Unfortunately, they were not correct answers. And Rita, we got to figure out how to get you your shirt. So thank you again, Rita, for participating and for giving us that history.
So I think Rita should join us someday sitting here.
And also, I guess she provided actual documentation, right? Because she had
a list,
the roster, so even better.
I
Cool.
believe so.
What were some of another one from Nikki Combs, challenges or hardships during your career in theater? You're laughing.
Being a union member.
Seriously though?
No. I mean,
because certainly there are some places in this state.
It wasn't that so much. It was just that if I wanted to do, that's what I had to do. And so, you just bite the bullet and do it.
There was this natural flow of, as technology changed the booths, in the 50s, the IA on a national scale didn't know what to do with television. Right. They just, television, what do you have?
The projectionists would have more than one screen to take care of, like, the worst I ever had was 10-plex and 8-plex.
Automation.
With the platter, I mean, and you got to keep everything on time, and you didn't have time to sit around and play pinochle or anything. I thought it was interesting towards the end here as the technology evolved. I kind of enjoyed the digital realm. Frankly, I'll piss a lot of old projectionists off. I'm over film. I don't care. Well, in the late 70s, I left the booth because I felt like it was a dead-end thing, and I had a feeling that it was eventually going to go to video of some sort. I had no idea what it was going to be or how soon, but it didn't for another 25 years, So, in the late 80s, they started building these multiplexes. I kept my card all this time because I wasn't going to give that thing up. I worked too hard for it. Bill Simpson called me and says, "Laddie, we need a projectionist." So at that time, I was working at Walmart in Kerrville for $3.15 an hour. They really liked me because they started me out at $2.85. And so I'd go over to Austin, pull a couple of shifts, and do what I did in Kerrville all week. And so anyway, they opened the Great Hills, and I was back in Austin in '89.
When I first came in, I was making $5 an hour through the local, and within a year or two, it went up to $5.25.
John, your dad worked at Hemisphere, didn't he?
Oh yeah, I went down to San
Hemisphere
Antonio.
I don't know how many of the pavilions down there had some form of high-tech projection.
Yeah.
And so there was guys from the local, Thurman Viola was one, and your dad, and I don't know who else.
Bill Simpson went
Bill
down
Simpson
there.
probably. They would drive from Austin to San Antonio.
68 in San Antonio was the World's Fair.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
That was where all the high tech was.
Sure.
And it took the IA a long time. I mean, I can remember the IA getting upset because of daylight savings time. And that meant that the drive-in theaters would only be able to show one movie, not two.
Yes.
Right.
And the
I
IA...
remember starting the movies and it's still so
Yeah,
bright
oh,
that you
yeah.
could barely see the cartoon.
Right.
Yeah.
Of course, the screen faced west. That didn't help.
Yeah, because it had never mattered before.
No.
So, Joan, as the only woman in this room at the time, are there any particular challenges from that perspective? Sorry to put you on the spot, but
in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, yes, I was generally the only girl on the crew, and I was a girl. But I was a student. I was working for $5 in a T-shirt. And of course, the beer they bought us. And I once kicked Elton John's manager out of the crew room because he was trying to take our beer. But I guess I've had it pretty fortunate because I came along the time I wasn't the first. I'm certainly not the last.
sure.
The technology in many fields has changed, particularly electrical, lighting, and such. In wardrobe, it doesn't change much.
It's not.
The biggest change is magnets.
Yeah, I was going to say Velcro, but yeah.
Velcro sometimes works, sometimes doesn't.
So magnets, yeah.
Magnets for a quick change.
Doesn't make that ripping sound.
Right, yeah.
But it does every so often stick to my little case that I carry, or my scissors. Yeah.
All right.
This is another one from Nikki. General attitudes towards unions when starting out or when you joined. Or...
Well, we went through a period when we had to picket the Presidio. Was it Presidio?
Yeah, the Presidio theaters,
There-
Riverside Drive,
It
and
was
down
just
Toby.
about every theater in town except for the Eddie Joseph theaters, which were strictly non-union, but everybody else was union operated. So as time progressed and they started making up long reels where the projectionists didn't need to be in the booth all the time, that's when they wanted to get away from the unions. They can get a manager in there and thread up the projector.
Right. And then go start the
And go.
popcorn.
And they still do that now with the digital stuff.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It's all remote.
Yeah.
So I guess that was a time when it got to be kind of the hairiest.
And
One on
Riverside Drive.
One on Riverside Drive, they hired us to put in the screen and the equipment, didn't they?
Yeah, we did all the
And
equipment,
they
all the
hired
screen.
projectionists, but then they locked them out.
Yeah.
Well, when the Performing Arts Center opened, of course, University of Texas has a ruling that they cannot negotiate with the union.
Right.
And so for the longest time, we just worked for the university. And in '89 is when the union actually made a push, an organizing drive, to get those people into the union. And at that time, I was not working there. I had moved over to Ballet Austin, and so I didn't join then. And it took me 10 more years. I joined in '99, according to my card. And in that time, Austin Musical Theater was working.
Right.
And noticing how much my pay was influenced by that union collective bargaining agreement.
Yeah.
And then, of course, they outsourced at the Performing Arts Center to Stage Alliance. And that's when I actually started paying my 5%, or actually it might have been 4% then, to the local. Because my attitude previously was, the local didn't get me that job. I got that job.
Yep.
But once we had the collective bargaining agreement and you can get that money away from me before I ever see it, fine. That's fine with me. And it does keep the wages better.
Yeah.
But watching the interplay between Irwin Center, Performing Arts Center, and Paramount, and how they all have influenced each other in the rates, has been interesting and helped us. And Paramount, for a while, was the hire.
Oh, yeah. Just want to thank everybody for watching the Austin Stagehand History Project. And in particular, I want to thank our panelists. And also some behind-the-scenes help that you can't see: Ryan Gallagher, Chad Warren, Martin Blacker, Travis Perrin. None of this could have happened without any of them. Michaela Cowan donated the masks. We want to thank her for that. I.A.T.S.E Local 205, who you've heard a lot about in this one. Thank them for their support on this. And lastly, Ballet Austin and Bill Sheffield, thank you for the use of the space and the video equipment.
Keep the cards and letters coming, and ask a question or present us with a short story of why you became a stagehand.
There you go, what he said. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then lastly, we'll just end with a moment of silence. We want to remember a few of our colleagues who we've lost since the pandemic began.
Bye.
Say goodnight, Gracie.
Good night, Gracie.
Good night, Gracie.